Okay, 2 Kings 17. The Assyrians are coming. In the 12th year, verse 1, of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Now that's a little change in writing. You know, most of them said, like Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Well, he was not as bad, but he was still bad, okay? Now, against him, verse 3, came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria. And Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, or Sobako, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. Now let me tell you something, folks. That would be like a foreign army coming into Savannah, Georgia tonight, taking over this town and moving everybody out of Chatham County, the surrounding counties, and taking them somewhere else, to some foreign land. That's exactly what is going on here in 2 Kings 17. Here's the people of Israel. Now remember, just about 30 years before this, they had peace and prosperity. Jeroboam II was their king. He won a lot of battles. Their land expanded. But they still did not repent. And so now it's been 200 years and they are done as a nation. You study history and you'll realize that most nations don't even last a couple of hundred years. We're really blessed of God that we've lasted more than 200 years ourselves, I'm going to tell you. We're really under the same government. It's amazing in and of itself. But I'm going to tell you what the problem was with the people of Israel, and I'm going to tell you what the problem with a lot of people in America and a lot of people in the world today. And we're all doomed to have the same thing happen to us if we're not careful. And it is this, that they forgot God. They forgot Him. They just lived their life like He wasn't even there. They just went on with their business just like He wasn't even there. And they forgot God. And they forgot who had been good to them. They forgot Him. Someone has said if we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it. Somebody says, well, why do I have to study history? It's so boring. Let me tell you something. History is not boring, at least to me. I know it is boring to some people. But let me tell you something. You learn by what I preach this Sunday. You learn by what people do that's good, and you learn by what people do that's bad. And you say, well, they did something good, so I think we ought to do that. They did something bad, I think we ought not to do that. Hoshea was the last of the kings. We studied that. He was not quite as evil as some of the others. But it's kind of like this. It's kind of like the nation had been sitting there for 200 years now, and rot had set in. And there was no saving it now. Even though this king was not as bad as some of the other kings, there was no saving it now. No saving it. So what King Hoshea did here, when the king of Assyria came to him, he said, well, we got this one last ditch effort here. I'm going to see if the king of Egypt can help us. Now, you say, what's the big deal about getting somebody around there to help you? Well, first of all, the king of Egypt is a picture of the world. You study the scriptures, you'll realize that Egypt is a picture of the world. And so, instead of Hoshea, you don't see him in any of those verses when King Shalmaneser came unto him of Assyria. You do not see him getting on his knees and saying, Lord God, would you help us? What does he do? He says, Egypt, would you help me? He also had asked Syria, to help him. But here we see that he was asking Egypt to help him, Egypt being a picture of the world. And here's where I say they forgot God in this sense, that it was Egypt where the nation of Israel was imprisoned for all those years, some 400 years, under the cruel taskmaster of the Pharaoh. And they forgot how good God was to get them out of that mess and give them their own land. And they just stuck their fist up in his face and would not do what he said to do. So they chose worldly alliances instead of aligning themselves with God. It's amazing, after all that God did to get them away from Egypt, how fast we forget. How fast we forget. Now, in verses 7 through 18, we see that they also forgot the mercy of God. And the writer here goes to great lengths. And of course, God actually wrote this. I understand that. But it's gone to great lengths to tell us the charges against the nation of Israel. The charges. The great sins that finally brought them down. It's almost like this. It's almost like we're looking at a divorce trial. A few years ago, I was called to jury duty and got on a jury, and it was a civil case. It was a divorce trial of all things. But we sat there for 3 days, and you know what I said at the end of that thing? I said, could we just let him and her go out here in the front of the courthouse and just duke it out until one of them wins and one of them loses? Because that's all they did for 3 days in there, and tried to confuse us in the jury and all this kind of stuff, bringing this in and that in, and paperwork after paperwork and all this kind of stuff. Well, here, however, there's no confusion. The husband of heaven, in essence, is divorcing his wife, the northern kingdom. And he lays out the charges, the bill of divorce. And by the way, if anyone here today could say that God did not have sufficient cause to do what He's getting ready to do, you're wrong. You're wrong. God had sufficient cause, and the wonder to me is, and I don't know about to you, but the wonder to me is that He was long-suffering for over 200 years with His crew. I mean, we go back to Jeroboam, ladies and gentlemen. Jeroboam the first, who set up the golden calves in Dan and Bethel and told his people, he said, this is who you're going to worship. And then just about every king after him, the other 18 kings, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as did Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Almost every one of them, it said that of him. And it's a wonder God lasted that long with those people. And by the way, if you ever get to thinking, and you'll hear people say this, well, I just don't think God's going to send anybody to hell. Well, first of all, God doesn't send anybody to hell. You make your own decision. But it's not so much to wonder that God would send somebody to hell. The real wonder here is that God would save us. That's the real wonder. The song says, the wonder of it all. That God loves me and He died for me. That's the wonder of it all. That should amaze us. That should absolutely amaze us. Let me ask you this. Do you know you're a sinner tonight? Have you done anything wrong? Any of you husbands hollered at your wives? Any of you wives hollered at your husbands? Any of y'all hollered at your kids? Any of you done some things? We do. And a lot of times it's not necessarily things we do or say, it's things we don't do or don't say. To him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. That's what James said. Now, we're all sinners. We're all sinners. Do you ever get to thinking sometimes after you have just blown it with your wife or blown it with your husband or blown it with your kids or blown it with somebody else or done this and that and the other, have you ever just wondered and said, I wonder why God would even love me and save me? I'm such an idiot. See, that's the wonder, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you, that's the wonder tonight. That He would save us. Not that He's going to send anyone to hell, but why would God save someone like me? Why would God save someone who is such a sinner? Now, when God gets rid of the Israelites, when He lets them get taken over by the Assyrians and get moved out of town, and basically, again, we don't hear from these 10 tribes ever again. Not in their tribally way. It was not done cold and callously. Matter of fact, God's heart was torn. The Bible tells us over in Hosea chapter 11, that's again, we studied Hosea in Sunday school Sunday, and the idea of Hosea, remember God told him to go out and marry Gomer, who was a woman who also slept with other men. She was a harlot. She was an adulterer. And God even told her, said, go out and marry her, buy her back from the slave market after she went into that, and buy her back and do that. And God said, that's a picture of what Israel has done to me. God's heart was rent. They were taken and taken away. Verse 7, this goes back to Egypt, where it says in verse 4, you know, that they tried to get the king of Egypt to help them. Look at verse 7. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods. They forgot where they came from. They forgot where they came from. And you know, sometimes we do too. And you know what that's going to do? That's going to hurt you. That's going to hurt you. You want to stay true to the Lord? I hope you would say yes to that question tonight. That you would want to stay true to the Lord. One way for you to stay true to the Lord is to remind yourself of all that He has done for you and not to forget it. Not to forget it. These people were ungrateful, ungracious, without any kind of thanksgiving in their heart. They went on their own way and did it their own things, their own way instead of God's way, because they were unthankful. They forgot God's mercy. They forgot God's goodness in their life. Hold your place there in 2 Kings 17. We may come back to it. Go to Psalm 103. Psalm 103. I'm going to tell you, we don't want to get like these Israelites. We don't want to get like these people in the northern kingdom. God said, go worship in Jerusalem. Worship at the temple. Jeroboam sets up these golden calves and says, here's your gods that brought you out of Egypt. Worship them. God says here, one of the sins that you committed against me, you forgot I even brought you out of Egypt. You worship these golden calves that you said brought you out of Egypt. Psalm 103, verse 1, very familiar verses. Verse 1 and 2, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless His holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. If you have that open tonight, let's read that together, all right? Let's just read that together. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless His holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. Now, how many of y'all ever say, well, you know, my memory's just not what it used to be? Anybody ever say that? The older you get, the more stuff is crammed in here. The more stuff is put on your hard drive, which is a limited hard drive here. And it starts getting slower. You know, the more stuff you get on your computer hard drive and all that, the slower it's going to get. Well, that's what happens with your brain too, all right? And we start thinking about our memory. And our memory, someone has said, seems to treasure up the refuse of the past and permits priceless treasures to lie neglected. I think that's awesome. Because see, what we do many times is all we think about is the bad things and the way things didn't go our way instead of the good things. And the times that things did, of course, was a blessing. I don't know if you journal or diary. Some people do that. And sometimes that's a good thing to be able to remember the goodness of God. The goodness of God. I'm going to tell you, because of our sinful nature and because of this old world, the flesh, the devil, we have a tendency to forget the goodness of God. We really do. And we have a tendency to think only on the bad things. We forget the goodness of God. Anybody ever grew up and had a grandfather clock or a cuckoo clock or anything like that? Okay. Now, if I'm right, the clocks, some of them went off every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, whatever, but there's some clocks that would go off every hour, right? I know if you're ever downtown, I think there's a clock that goes off, on the hour. Maybe it goes off on 15 minutes too, I can't remember. But yeah, you'll hear it doing that. And you'll always be reminded, of course, that it was there. Ding, 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 whatever. You'll always remember that. And then there's certain other clocks that never do anything. They just show you the time. Right? They show you the time. There are two different clocks. One that makes a lot of noise. One that really never makes any noise. Right? You have to look at it. You have to make the effort to see what time it is. You know what the psalmist is saying here? We have to work hard on our memory to remember how good God has been. Those Israelites forgot. They forgot. Forgetting is a passive thing. Remembering is an active thing. I've told you before that in school you have forgotten most of the things that you learned and were tested on and made straight A's on. You forgot most of it. You knew it at the time, but you don't know it now. Did you sit around and say, well, I got to forget that, I got to forget that, I got to forget that, I got to forget that? Well, if you do that, you'll never forget it. What happened? Just through time, it just happened, right? You just forgot it. You ever run into somebody that you hadn't seen in a long time and you said, man, that used to be my best friend, but I don't remember what his name is. Why? Because you hadn't seen him in a long time. Man, I grew up with him. What's his name? Yeah, that's right. Every now and then I have to say to my wife, I said, what's their names now? Or when my grandmother was alive, my Granny Fields, some of you knew her before she died, but I'd go to family reunions and I'd just stay right by her. And I said, now who is that? Who is that? Who is that? You know what I mean? Well, see, our remembering is active. Forgetting is passive. And so we have to work super duper hard at remembering. And the psalmist is saying, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. He says all. Notice he says all that is within me. Have you ever used that phrase? You know when we normally use that phrase? When we're angry. Man, everything in me right now just wants to. Well, what it really needs to happen is everything within me, you need to say, everything within me wants to bless the Lord. That's what he's saying. It takes extra work. All that is within me, it takes everything, extra effort we must apply ourselves. And look at what we should remember. Verse 2 says, forget not all his benefits. Notice that it says, all that is within me should not forget all his benefits. All. You know, we look around and say, well, God's really blessed other people. Well, that's true. God's blessed us all. But you, how has God blessed you? Those Israelites, let me tell you something, they forgot. They went to the point to calling Egypt and saying, hey, would you come help us against the Assyrians? The place that God moved them out of and gave them their own land. that they blew. They blew. They had a great opportunity. And even a few years before that had a great opportunity to repent. Peace and prosperity. Amos and Hosea and Isaiah to an extent and Micah to an extent, preaching to them. And other prophets. They refused. Has God blessed you tonight? I'll finish this one story and then we'll take up in verse number 8 back in 2 Kings 17 next week. But anyhow, you remember we studied the story of Esther during Vacation Bible School. I love that story. It's a great story. It's the only book in the Bible where God is not mentioned by name, but you see Him all behind the scenes. You remember that Mordecai had saved the king's neck. Mordecai had overheard these guys. Matter of fact, some of the guards, some of the Secret Service guys. Did y'all see that guy climb the fence and get into the White House the other day? Did y'all see that on the news? Man, somebody, I said, I don't know why they didn't just knock him down before he, was something, but anyhow. Anyhow, it was a couple of the Secret Service guys, the guys that guarded the king that was going to kill him one night, and Mordecai overheard them talking and went and told somebody, and they went and told the authorities, and they got those guys. And it was written down in a book, in the Chronicle of the Kings. One night, the king could not sleep. I tell you, if you go to bed at night and can't sleep, you've heard this, don't count sheep, count your blessings. But anyhow, the king woke up and he couldn't sleep. And so he said, well, just come read to me. Read me a bedtime story or something. And so they pulled out the book of the Chronicles of the King, started reading to him, and they read the story about Mordecai saving him from these guards. He said, I didn't even know that. And then he made this statement, have we thanked that man yet? Have we thanked that man yet? No, we haven't, King. Well, we need to get to that right now. Right now we need to thank him. Who's out there? And of course they brought in Haman, and the king says, now Haman, what do you think I ought to do for the man that I really want to honor and thank for? And of course Haman said, that's me. It's me that he wants to thank. And so he put it on him. And the king said, okay, go do that for Mordecai. And so that's what happened. But here's the point of the story. We get to thinking about our blessings. Have we thanked God? Just as the king said, have we thanked that man that saved me? He did something great. He blessed me. Have we thanked God? We think about all the bad things, well, this didn't go my way, and God, where are you at? And you don't love me anymore, and I don't know what's wrong with you, and why'd you allow this to happen to me? Come on. He's good to us. He's good to us. Don't forget His goodness. Don't forget His mercy. You're heading down to tubes like the nation of Israel did. The Assyrians are coming for you when you forget God's goodness and His mercy in your life. And if nothing else, He saved you from hell. That's worthy enough, is it not?